early laws and precepts of Akkadian farmers. First paragraph lost. In the 6th month, only the Akkadian text of this paragraph remains. It is interesting to note that the month is designated by a number, as in some of the omen and astronomical tablets. In the 6th month of the year, the agriculturist marks his establishment. He agrees about the covenant, the agreement. He completes the wordings of the covenant with a promise. Well, it's probably here in this sense the agreement, right? The fixed decree. He collects his tax gift and surrounds the field with hedges. He brings together the gazelles, his flock, and gathers the birds, and so forth. All his doings, all that he should be doing, according to this covenant. Okay. Everything is made equal and on the same footing, man as man, house as house, seed as seed. When the time of working and reaping comes, the master sends from his place as help a long cart and an ox for thrashing the corn and the corn of the field. So they all put in their 50 cents worth, right? Following this covenant, these rules, these set rules. What's this, number 2? 3 paragraphs lost, column 2. He draws water for the field. The paragraph is mutilated. It may refer to the establishment of some irrigating instrument. Some instrument of irrigation. Okay, and there's more here. On the 30th of the 8th month in fine weather, in Akkadian the month Apin, it's the 8th month. Okay, into that month. Column 4. There's a 5 indication here somewhere. Okay. If the house is not arranged as a proper house, he shall pay a fine of 10 shekels. 2 or more paragraphs and the colophon are lost. That 5 footnote here says the tablet from which the above is a translation is of great importance as giving us information and particulars as to the system of land, tenure and cultivation of the land in the early Akkadian period. The tablet speaks first of the simple tenure, and it shows, paragraph 2, that the tenure was to begin legally from the 6th month, that is the Babylonian Lulu. The end of that month is no doubt meant, and it would tend to confirm the opinion that at an earlier date Tisritu was the first and Elulu the last month of the year, though the Babylonians might have had an agricultural year, as we have a financial year, a scholastic or university year, etc. After having chosen the farm and agreed to the conditions of the contract, the first step of the farmer was to determine his position toward the treasury, for among the Babylonians, as among moderns, the payment of the taxes is a proof of the legality of the holding. After that, the farmer had to gather his livestock. The tablet says gazelles, and so carries us back to the earliest period, for the ox and sheep did not come originally from Babylonia, and the first animal domesticated there must have been a kind of gazelle, it's a form of deer, isn't it, which was found wild in the country. In the tablet, however, the word gazelle is no doubt taken to mean any kind of quadruped, four-legged animal. In the same way, the word birds designated here, domesticated birds, doves, ostriches, and at a later period hens, which were introduced a long time before the Persian conquest. Being once established in his farm, he used to give all his time to it, devote his time to it, to raising them, etc. After these preliminaries about tenure in general come the specifications about the various kinds of tenure. The first spoken of is that the tenure by half, as it is called. It appears to signify the properties which used to belong to being half to the lord and half to the peasant who was attached to the soil as serf. It's like servant, isn't it? In that case, the farmer worked for his master. He kept the livestock and the seeds, but everything was controlled by the agent of the landlord. In the field of partnership, on the contrary, the landlord was placed on the same footing as his tenant. If the latter gave his labour, the former had to provide him with the material, implements, utensils, stocks, grain, seeds, etc. So it was a unified thing. Right? There's no problems here. They all, accepted this covenant, this agreement, this contract, etc., and they're helping each other out within that framework. The philosophy of an unknown ruler, and apparently this line here has been translated from the Akkadian, the Assyrian text being wanting, and the words a recent lacuna being written instead. This makes it clear that the scribe who copied the tablet for Ashurbanipal's library did not understand Akkadian and could not therefore supply the translation. And 2, to the waters their God has returned. This seems to be quoted from a hymn describing the return of Oannes to the Persian Gulf. And here is some more historical inscriptions on a statue of Lugal Zagisi, perhaps the first world conqueror, or that particular world as they knew it. I don't think they conquered Australia or the Pacific Islands. Okay, on a statue of Sarukin, either the conqueror Sargon or a still earlier king of similar name. These writings were found and translated. And it continues. The legend of Sargon, the king of Agade. Okay, it's important you may study this in your own time and then take note of the indications, the footnote indications at the bottom. Gives you a extra explanation of what was being said. This is number 10. Unto the great Durulu I went up, some portions missing, I altered whatsoever king shall be exalted after me. Down here it has a city in eastern Babylonia. The name signifies wall of God. Probably a wall of a god. One of the gods. Chronicles concerning Sargon and other early kings and what he did in his many quests. And it continues on. Omen tablet of Sargon of Akkad. When the moon on the right of it was the colour of the sword, etc., etc. And against his face the 7 advanced, the moon was favourable for Naram Sin, who at this season marched against the country of Magana and seized the country of Magana, and the king of Magana his hand captured. And down here it has the Sinaitic Peninsula. A newfound list of kings, purporting to begin from the creation. He's talking about Ur of Chaldea, Mesopotamia. The Great Age of Babylonia, 2100 to 1100 BC, the reign of Hammurabi, the first law code. So here's the first lawgiver, gave this code. As for the land of Sumer and Akkad, I collected its scattered people and procured food and drink for them in abundance and plenty. I pastured them, or he looked after them, like a shepherd to sheep. Hammurabi. If a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. Yeah, it's the law of Hammurabi, or Hammurabi, the Hammurabi Code, probably of which the commandments stemmed from, or were influenced by, the Levitical laws, etc., etc. The writings of Hammurabi. Introduction. The career of King Hammurabi has been already outlined. He was the ruler who chiefly established the greatness of Babylon, the world's first metropolis. Many relics of Hammurabi's reign, 2125 to 2081 BC, have been preserved, and today we can study this remarkable king as a conqueror in his royal inscriptions, as a just and energetic personal ruler in his personal letters, and as a wise lawgiver in his celebrated code. His inscriptions, which stand first in the section, show that he was seriously religious. He attributes all his successes to his city's god, that Marduk, or Bel Marduk, who was thereafter to be known as Babylonia's chief god. Having established the supremacy of Babylon not only over Sumer and Akkad, but over the surrounding mountain and desert lands, King Hammurabi next began a series of public works of large importance. He was a builder of temples, city walls and canals. He was also, as his letters here show, a watchful administrator of justice. The Sin Idin Nam, to whom most of his surviving letters are addressed, was his local governor over the city of Lhasa, where the letters were found. But by far the most remarkable of the Hammurabi records is his Code of Laws, or the Hammurabi Code of Laws, the earliest known example of a ruler proclaimed publicly to his people an entire body of laws, arranged in orderly groups so that all men might read and know what was required of them. The code was carved upon a black stone monument 8 feet high and clearly intended to be read in public view. This noted stone was found in the year 1901, not in Babylon, but in a city of the Persian mountains, to which some later conqueror must have carried it in triumph. It begins and ends with addresses to the gods. Even a law code was in those days regarded as a subject for prayer, though the prayers here are chiefly cursings of whoever shall neglect or destroy the law. So this predated the 42 laws of Ma'at from Egypt. It predated this by centuries, would say. The code then regulates in clear and definite strokes the organisation of society. The judge who blunders in a law case is to be expelled from his judgeship forever and heavily fined. The witness who testifies falsely is to be slain. Indeed, all the heavier crimes are made punishable with death. So these people out there who say, oh, God's cruel, he's a tyrant, all this sort of stuff, he puts these people to death, kills all these people, etc., etc., don't realise that prior to that, this Hammurabi was a enforcer of that same massacre, murderous genocide, etc. There was somebody doing that exact same thing way before it became a biblical or a Mosaic thing, right? Okay, so it says the code then regulates in clear and definite strokes the organisation of society. The judge who blunders in a law case is to be expelled from his judgeship forever and heavily fined. The witness who testifies falsely is to be slain. Indeed, all the heavier crimes are made punishable with death. Even if a man builds a house badly and it falls and kills the owner, the builder is to be slain. If the owner's son was killed, then the builder's son is slain. We can see where the Hebrews learned their law of an eye for an eye, as we just explained, right? Just detailed. These grim retaliatory punishments take no note of excuses or explanations, but only of the fact, with one striking exception. An accused person was allowed to cast himself into the river, the Euphrates. Apparently the art of swimming was unknown, for if the current bore him to the shore alive, he was declared innocent. If he drowned, he was guilty. So we learn that faith in the justice of the ruling gods was already firmly, though somewhat childishly, established in the minds of men. Okay, we'll repeat that. We feel we might have missed something. An accused person was allowed to cast himself into the river, the Euphrates. Apparently the art of swimming was unknown, for if the current bore him to the shore alive he was declared innocent, if he drowned he was guilty. So we learn that faith in the justice of the ruling gods was already firmly, though somewhat childishly, established in the minds of men. Yet even with this earlier set of laws, as with most things Babylonian, we find ourselves dealing with the end of things rather than the beginnings. Hammurabi's code was not really the earliest. The preceding sets of laws have disappeared, but we have found several traces of them, and Hammurabi's own code clearly implies their existence. He is but reorganizing a legal system long established. So someone else before him had this similar code, and he's just re-established them and reinforced them. Inscriptions of Hammurabi, translated in English. These are inscribed in both the Sumerian and the Babylonian language. They are here given as translated by L.W. King in his Letters and Inscriptions of Hammurabi. Letters of Hammurabi. Unto Sin Idinam say, thus saith Hammurabi, and continues. As you can see, they are letters, probably on tablets, to these certain others. Hammurabi's code of laws. When Anu, the sublime king of the Anunnaki, and Bel, the lord of heaven and earth, who decreed the fate of the land, assigned to Marduk. Marduk was Babylon's chief god, and in Hammurabi's day was already regarded as having received from the other and older gods all the authority. Okay, so it's not the god of heaven, as we know of today, the father of Jesus the Christ. Okay, older gods, other and older gods. When Anu, the sublime king of the Anunnaki, and Bel, the lord of heaven and earth, who decreed the fate of the land, assigned to Marduk, the overruling son of Er, god of righteousness, dominion over earthly man, and made him great among the Agigi. They called Babylon by his illustrious name, made it great on earth, and found an everlasting kingdom in it, whose foundations are laid so solidly as those of heaven and earth. Then Anu and Bel, called by name, not too sure if this is an error here, this part here, by name, called him by name, Hammurabi, the exalted prince, who feared God. Yeah, that's what it says here. Then Anu and Bel called by name me, Hammurabi, the exalted prince, who feared God, to bring about the rule of righteousness in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoers, so that the strong should not harm the weak, so that I should rule over the black-headed people. Okay, it's talking about the hair. Doesn't actually mean that they were black people, as some like to think. Like Shamash, and this explains that they were down here. Shamash, the sun god, and enlighten the land to further the well-being of mankind. No reason why these people weren't actually tanned or dark. Okay, then Anu and Bel called by name me, Hammurabi, the exalted prince, who feared God, to bring about the rule of righteousness in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoers, so that the strong should not harm the weak, so that I should rule over the black-headed people, like Shamash, the sun god, and enlighten the land to further the well-being of mankind. Hammurabi, the prince, called of Baal Am, I, making riches and enriching Nippur and Durilu beyond compare, sublime patron of Ekur, temple of Bel in Nippur, the seat of Bel's worship, and so forth. And he talks intensely about that. And here's the explanation of all these numbers next to these wordings. Code of laws. anyone bring an accusation against the man, and the accused go to the river and leap into the river, if he sink in the river, his accuser shall take possession of his house. But if the river prove that the accused is not guilty, and he escape unhurt, then he who has brought the accusation shall be put to death, while he who leaped into the river shall take possession of the house that had belonged to his accuser. Okay, and so forth. If anyone lose an article and find it in the possession of another, if the person in whose possession the thing is found say, a merchant sold it to me, I paid for it before witnesses, and if the owner of the thing say, I will bring witnesses who know my property, then shall the purchaser before the merchant who sold it to him, and the witnesses before whom he bought it, and the owner shall bring witnesses who can identify his property. The judge shall examine their testimony, both of the witnesses before whom the price was paid, etc., etc. So that sounds like an ancient form of the modern court, the jury, etc. Okay? Jury of peers, who then decide, okay, is the guy telling the truth or is he lying, and what's the justifiable punishment? Justifiable punishment for his lying or coveting or whatever it was. Coveting someone else's possessions. And it continues. "136 laws later, 154 laws later. Okay, it's continuing on. Wow, 206, 236. It's quite a lot of laws there. Oh my gosh, 264. 282. The epilogue. Laws of justice which Hammurabi the wise king established. A righteous law and pious statute did he teach the land. Hammurabi the protecting king am I. I have not withdrawn myself from the men whom Baal gave to me. The rule over whom Marduk gave to me I was not negligent, but I made them a peaceful abiding place, etc., etc. I have uprooted the enemy above and below, in north and south, subdued the earth, brought prosperity to the land, guaranteed security to the inhabitants in their homes. A disturber was not permitted. The great gods have called me. I am the salvation-bearing shepherd, whose staff is straight, the good shadow that is spread over my city. On my breast I cherish the inhabitants of the land of Sumer and Akkad. In my shelter I have let them repose in peace. In my deep wisdom I have enclosed them. That the strong might not injure the weak, in order to protect the widows and orphans, I have in Babylon the city where Anu and Baal raise high their head, in Esagil the temple, whose foundation stands firm as heaven and earth, and so forth. So he was a very righteous, pious ruler, king. Okay. The Great Age of Babylonia, 2100 to 1100 BC, the epic of creation. I will create man who shall inhabit the earth, that the service of the gods may be established and their shrines built, epic of creation. In the future of mankind, when the days grow old, may this be heard without ceasing, may it hold sway forever, epic of creation. The creation epic. Introduction. The creation epic is usually regarded as the most important of our recovered Babylonian texts. It was the final or standard form of religious belief, which was gradually developed from earlier creation legends, such as we have already shown. This finally established form of the narrative was named by both Babylonians and Assyrians Enuma Elish, or Enuma Elish, when in the height, because these were its opening words. It was composed of 7 tablets, or 7 separate chants of about equal length. Many fragments of these tablets have been recovered, some in Assyrian, some in late Babylonian texts, so that we are now able to reconstruct almost the entire epic, though unfortunately, as the reader will see, the most defective tablets, the 5th and 6th, are just the 2 which might have held most interest for us. In them, the God is actually at work on the details of creation, which are not unlike those described in Genesis. As to the relation of the Genesis narrative and this late Babylonian one, we can only speak in general terms. Abraham led his people out from Babylonia, or Chaldee, about the time of Hammurabi. Probably the Babylonian narrative had not then crystallized into its present form. Roughly, we would assign the quote, when in the height, unquote, series to the centuries immediately following Hammurabi. It was he who made Babylon's god, Marduk, the chief god, but the shifting of the creation tale so as to centre around Marduk rather than around the older gods must have taken considerable time. Abraham probably could have known only the older Sumerian legends. To understand the when in the height epic, some understanding of the older gods is necessary. The city of Uruk, or Uruk, may have been the very earliest of Sumerian religious centres, for Anu, the god of Uruk, is preserved through all the legends as the first great god of progress, the guide of all the later ones. He became the god of the sky. Ea, that other very ancient god who appeared out of the sea to rule the city of Eridu, and who became the god of the sea, was regarded as the successor of Anu. After that, whenever any city rose to empire, its gods seem to have been accepted as a brother of Anu and Ea, and as having received from them his supreme power. Only when Babylon grew so much greater than all the other cities was its god Marduk permanently accepted as supreme. When finally the Assyrians rose to power, they worshipped their own god Ashur, but they kept him as their special national god and did not deny Marduk his long established rank as the creator. So you notice with this Ashur, okay, there's in the Bible there's Jacob's grandson who was called Ashur, but it was spelled A-S-H-E-R, so don't get confused between the two. This is the god of the this is the name of God in the Assyrian, and the god of the Asherai, or the Assyrian peoples, those of Nineveh that Jonah visited, and the latter Assyrians. So these kings like Ashurbanipal, Ashurbanipal, etc., they all took this title, not saying that they were God, but that they were appointed by this particular god to sit on that throne and to rule over those people, right? So that's why you have Ashur dash Banipal, or one complete word, Ashurbanipal. Okay, that's why they put the dash there to separate, if you know, okay, that they're not claiming themselves to be a god, okay, but representatives placed on that throne by that particular god. Ashur, if you have a look in Exodus, early Exodus, chapter of Exodus, it says to Moses, "You must go tell the people, the house of Israel, that I, Ahaya, Ashur Ahaya, am their God. I'm their God forever, and this is the name that they will use." Okay, for generations to come, to the end of time, etc. Which basically says in English, because okay, not corrected grammatically or put into this perfect sentence, but something along the lines of I, yeah, I dot 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 I, or I be I, right? Or you could say in English, I am I, the I am I, right? The great I am, etc., etc., in the Hebrew, etc. But that's basically what it comes down to. I, Ashur, I, and translated from the original Assyrian Aramaic into English, it would be I, he who is, or I dot 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 I Ashur I. Okay, we don't want to lose you in that explanation. Basically, it would be I Ashur I God I. When finally the Assyrians rose to power, they worshipped their own god Ashur, but they kept him as their special national god and did not deny to Marduk his long established rank as the creator. As for the other gods of the creation epic, there is an older generation of whom we know little. They are all represented as originating with Apsu, the primeval father god or first thought, and Tiamat, the primeval mother or blank chaos from which life issued. These older, cruder, half-beast gods become the monsters who object to the light and effort and progress that Anu and Ea have inaugurated. Tiamat, from whose vast bulk Marduk creates the universe, becomes later identified with the waters of sea and sky, but this was obviously not the original conception of her. The epic of creation, the first tablet. When in the height, heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name, and the primeval Apsu who begat them, and chaos Tiamut, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen. When of the gods none had been called into being, and none bore a name, and no destinies were ordained, then were created the gods in the midst of heaven. And has a footnote indication here. The existence of Samamu, or heaven, so early in the creation story is not inconsistent with Marduk's subsequent acts of creation. After slaying Tiamat, his first act was to use half of her body as a covering for the Samamu. It is therefore clear that the Samamu was vaguely conceived as already in existence. 2. This line evidently contains a description of Nudamud, Ea, and in view of the important part he plays in the first and second tablets, it is not improbable that the two lines following also refer to him. So that would be here. Nudamud, whom his fathers, his begetters, abounding in all wisdom. He was exceeding strong, he had no rival, and so forth. And continues. Where do we see that indication? Lines 61 to 91 are almost wholly illegible. It means like really, really hard to understand, hard to read, etc. He spake, indication of footnote. The speech that follows is evidently addressed to Tiamat. The speaker refers to the evil fate which has overtaken Apsu and Mumu in their revolt against the gods. He encourages Tiamat to take vengeance for them, line 103, and by continuing the struggle to obtain with him the slothful peace which she desires. From the fact that Tiamat subsequently promoted Kingu to lead her forces because he had given her support and introduced him as her chosen spouse, it may be inferred that the speaker of the lines followed was Kingu. And it continues. To the third tablet. Marduk and the dragon. Marduk, chief god of Babylon, with his thunderbolts destroys Tiamat, the dragon of primeval chaos. And there's the ancient depictions of that incident from the Assyrians. That would be Tiamat, I suppose, or Tiamut, and it would be the hero, the god that subdued or destroyed her, according to those texts. Fourth tablet. This continues. Long saga. The sixth tablet, when Marduk heard the words of the gods. Okay, there's this note here. Where's this number? Together they shall be opposed, 22, indicated here, and unto evil shall they, and Ea answered and spake the word, etc., etc. down here it has this author, or this translating author, etc., thought that there can be no doubt that is si imuntum corresponds to the Hebrew isim, bone, which is employed in Genesis 2:23 in the phrase isim me as my bone of my bones. 21 is it? Was it? Okay, 21. It is interesting to note that the reason that is here is implied for the creation of mankind, i.e. that the gods may have worshippers. There is clearly a reference to this in line 29 of the 7th tablet, where after referring to Marduk's mercy upon the gods, his enemies, the text goes on, for their forgiveness did he create mankind. 22. The sense seems to be that Marduk, by the creation of man, will establish the worship of the gods, but at the same time will punish the gods for their complaints, because apparently man was making too much noise or something like that. It was really bothering him. It is possible that in his speech that follows Ea dissuades Marduk from carrying out the second part of his proposal. It is probable, 23, it's probable that the missing portion of the text corresponded closely with the account of the creation of man and animals given by Berossus. The tablet K 3364, cuneiform text part 13 PL 29F, has been thought to belong to the creation series and to contain the instructions given by Marduk to man after his creation. Had this been so, it would have formed part of the 6th tablet. This translated author has given reasons for believing that the text inscribed upon K 3364 has no connection with the creation series, but is part of a long composition containing moral precepts or principles. And it goes into the 7th tablet. May they blank, his name blank, and then bits missing obviously. And 27 here indicates this is probably the last line of the tablet. It may here be noted that for the text of the 7th tablet given in the preceding pages, only those fragments have been used which are proved by the commentaries to contain missing portions of the text. Several other fragments which from their contents and style of writing may possibly belong to copies of the text have not been included. The text of one such fragment, probably says here S 2013, probably Sumerian or something like that. Not really sure what that S indicates. Is of peculiar interest. In line 10 and beyond, it refers to Tiamat, Eliti, and Tiamat Sap Liti, the ocean Tiamat which is above, and the ocean Tiamat which is beneath. In a close parallel to the waters which were above the firmament and the waters which were under the firmament of Genesis 1:7. And it's the end of the creation epic. And here it continues with the creation epic, the fight with Tiamat, another version. Which has an indication here, 28. Strictly speaking, the text is not a creation legend, though it gives a variant form of the principal incident in the history of creation, according to the version in Numa Elish, or at least. Here the fight with the dragon did not precede the creation of the world, but took place after men had been created and cities had been built. The form of the name, this is 29, the form of the name here used is Tamtu, the sea. 30, that Kaspu is a space that can be covered in 2 hours travelling, i.e. about 6 or 7 miles, and so forth. 8, we then have a consistent picture of the dragon as a long thin snake, rearing his head on high. His claws might well have been believed to extend for 300 or 350 miles, and the raising of his head in the air to a height of 6 or 7 miles would not be inconsistent with the measurement of his mouth as 6 cubits, i.e. some 10 feet or more across. And it continues. The Kuthayan creation legend, column 1. '33 indication here, footnote. This is not really a creation legend, though the first translators read it as one, and so named it as above because it speaks of the city of Kutha, or Kutha. Really, it is told by some ancient king who thanks the gods for having saved his land from a horde of monsters. 34? I.e., the land was in confusion so that no business was transacted and no records were kept. Okay, something over here about the missing portion of the column. Probably continued the description of the hordes of monsters who were oppressing the land. The king then inquires of the gods whether he should give the enemy battle. It's an indication up here somewhere of this. Can't see the number. I'll probably just on here 35. The upper half of the column is wanting. And continues.